people have suggested she's going to operate even to more to the left of Biden as it relates to regulation, potentially taxes, other things related to business.
Kamala Harris is pro-business. Kamala Harris, this is Kamala Harris's campaign. It's not Joe Biden's campaign, right? Kamala Harris is not Joe Biden. You know, I've talked to the Biden administration. I've talked to the Trump administration. I've talked to the Obama administration. And I think the Harris administration has been most open. Let me just tell you, I probably talk to them, and I know others do as well, 3-4 times a week about what's the best approach to taxing the wealthy and increasing revenues and cutting costs for that matter.
Wealthy man Mark Cuban called into CNBC to assure everyone that there's no need to panic about Kamala Harris potentially pursuing progressive economic policies because it ain't gonna happen. In fact, Mark has been having some interesting conversations and he's shedding light on those conversations with Kamala Harris. Let's hear more.
A lot of folks have come on our broadcast who are critical of the vice president and her campaign have suggested that she's a progressive and that she is going to operate very similarly to Biden, or in some cases, people have suggested she's going to operate even to more to the left of Biden as it relates to regulation, potentially taxes, other things related to business. On the other side, you hear, at least privately, from folks in and around the Biden campaign saying, no, we're really tacking to the middle. What do you think is really happening here?
Kamala Harris is pro-business. Kamala Harris, this is Kamala Harris's campaign. It's not Joe Biden's campaign, right? Kamala Harris is not Joe Biden. They're very, very different. She's trying to be, again, this is my perspective. She's trying to be very respectful of the president and everything he's proposed. She's trying not to directly contradict him in any way. You know, so she talks a little bit around the subject when it comes to taxing in particular, but she's going center 100%.
So, look, I am sharing this with everyone because these are the types of clues that should be paid attention to in predicting what an administration is going to be like. Now, I already kind of had an inkling that Kamala Harris was kind of moving toward, as Mark Cuban is like referring to it, the center when it comes to economic policies. I also got that sense after she became the Democratic nominee, and honestly, in the beginning, Bernie Sanders was just kind of like hesitant about it. And I knew that it had to do with where she stands on some of these issues versus Biden, who was a little more left wing on some of these economic policies, relatively speaking. And that relatively speaking part is really important because obviously there's been a lot of neoliberal policies that have been endorsed by Democrats in recent years. So Biden kind of moved on that a little bit. But what do you think, Cenk?
Hey, don't scroll away. Come back. Because before the video continues, we just want to urge you to lend your support to TYT. You power our honest reporting. You do it at tyt.com/team, and we love you for it. First off, he said, they're not the Biden administration. They're more pro-business. Oh boy.
I know, yeah.
And then he even mentioned Barack Obama and how she's more pro-business than Obama. Obama did the bank bailouts. In Obama's recovery in 2010, more than 90% of the gains went to the top 1%. If she's more pro-corporate than that, Jesus, what are we gonna get? So progressives, I need you to, please, I don't want you to get your heart broken and then collapse into a black pill universe and despondent. She's not gonna do any of the progressive things she's saying. She's not gonna do the overwhelming majority of them. She's gonna do the same thing that all Democrats do, release valve. Just 5% to 10% change so there isn't a physical revolution, right? Now, that being said, the Republicans go in the wrong direction, opposite direction. They make it more pro-corporate, and Trump is going around bragging about how he's the most corporate guy in the world, and he's gonna give them even bigger tax cuts and more deregulation and more mergers and everything that they ever wanted, right? Because he's trying to get their donor money. So it's relative. So as I watched that whole interview, look, Mark Cuban was a relative good guy here. He's a rich guy saying corporate capital gains is at 24%. Kamala Harris wants to move it to 28%. And I agree, the capital gains tax on people like me should be higher, he's saying. Okay, now look, we can make an argument for being a better rate than that and higher than that. And we can agree and disagree in parts with Mark Cuban, but he's trying to push in the right direction. So he's not the bad guy here, okay? But when you look at the number that they put up on the screen of Biden saying the capital gains rate should be 44%. But guys, the whole conversation is nonsense. she's not gonna move it from 24 to 28. She's not gonna move it at all. Biden said it should be 44. Is it 44? No, it's 24, because he didn't do anything to move it. He didn't do anything. That's what Democrats do 98% of the time. They give you all these promises during an election cycle, and then you have debates, nonsense debates on CNBC about what they're promising to do. It doesn't really matter, because they almost never do what they promise. So, of course, same is true of Trump on steroids. Never, oh, I promise you the wall. At the couple of months before the election, oh right, the wall, I forgot about the wall. But he didn't forget to bring corporate taxes from 35% down to 21% and give trillions of dollars to his rich friends.
God, I'm so black-pilled. I'm just so black. Like, what are we rooting for here? You know what I'm saying?
Like, oh, I know, that's a great question.
What are we rooting? Like, what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to cheerlead that? Look, you should vote for, I don't, anyway, go ahead. Tell me what we should root for.
So look, guys, there's a camp that says, oh, Kamala Harris is the savior, or she's gonna be amazing, she's gonna do all these things. And by the way, 90% of that camp, after she did, because more establishment Democrats, right? After she doesn't do those things, they'll come back and yell at us and go, oh, that's unreasonable to ask for her to do all those things. Well, then why are you excited about it now? When later you're gonna tell me that she had no chance of ever passing them, and the parliamentarian, and we're unreasonable for asking her to do the things that she promised, right? So that's the same cycle that happens every time with the Democrats. The Republicans are even more corporate, et cetera, as I've explained, and Donald Trump's a raging lunatic. So what am I fighting for as a populist progressive? I'm fighting to live today to fight another day, okay? So Trump is so unhinged. He's talking about arresting his political opponents. He's talking about arresting anyone that he says doesn't agree that there was mail-in fraud. The election hasn't even happened. He says unhinged things 24/7, makes up crazy stuff, and has already tried to end democracy and said that we should terminate the Constitution. And no, he wasn't joking. No, it wasn't taken out of context. When he lost the elections, he said, let's just get rid of the Constitution. I'm not handing the country over to a madman. So now, but I don't think Kamala Harris is the savior. So what we're doing is live to fight another day. At some point, you need a populist to rise up on the Democratic side and win a presidential primary. And then you've got a fighter's chance. But right now, we're just like, this election is to just survive. You're not gonna get to have a vote for a populist progressive or an economic populist on the right. You're not gonna get to vote for any of those guys if you put in the guy who says, if I lose, then it wasn't a real election, it was rigged, with no evidence at all, a giant liar who doesn't like the idea of democracy and has said it 1,000 times, right? How much clearer does he have to be? So I will hold Kamala Harris accountable. We all need to hold Kamala Harris accountable. If you go back to, oh, I will bow down to Kamala Harris, we should always bow down to the Democrats, even if they never deliver, then no, we gain nothing from this election. We have to survive, and then, for God's sake, a populist progressive must win in a primary. Otherwise, we will live in corporate rule forever.
Yeah, the idea of holding Kamala Harris accountable, let's also not pretend like that's a possibility. They don't care what we think. They don't care that we're upset at the broken promises. I mean, look at Joe Biden. I mean, he hasn't moved an inch when it comes to, the war in Gaza, because he doesn't care. It doesn't matter to him, right? Like, we're nothing to him, and we're nothing to Kamala Harris either. She wants to win. They're gonna tell us what we want to hear right now, but it's important to pay attention to what kind of conversations are happening in the rooms that we're not in. And that's what Mark Cuban is shedding light on. So let's watch the next clip and hear what he has to say about where she's getting her advice on economic policies.
I've talked to the Biden administration, I've talked to the Trump administration, I've talked to the Obama administration, and I think the Harris administration has been most open. I mean, they've been very clear to me and other business people that, look, we've realized that rich people have to pay their fair share, but we don't have all the answers. So Mark and others, what do you think is the best approach to taxing wealthy people so that they pay their fair share to help contribute to reducing the deficit, and we can come up with some new ideas? And let me just tell you, I probably talked to them, and I know others do as well, 3-4 times a week about what's the best approach to taxing the wealthy and increasing revenues and cutting costs for that matter.
You know, credit to Kamala Harris, that is a good source of information. I too like to ask the criminals how they'd like to be punished for the crimes they've committed.
Yeah, I know you're using an analogy here.
Yeah.
And so, and look, on the one hand, should you talk to business people and get their perspective? Of course you should, right? But you should also talk to other people. You should talk to everybody, progressive economists, conservative economists, because you don't want to miss anything. And you don't, because especially when you're doing regulation, if you do something slightly wrong, it could lead to bigger problems, okay? But once you've talked to everyone, you should make up your own mind and actually deliver for the American people. But what Anna and I are worried about is if you're talking to business leaders 3 to 4 times a week, as Cuban just said, that means that's the main people you're talking to. And you're getting that perspective, and even if they're good guys, they're gonna give you a perspective of, oh, well, look, not too much taxes, not too much regulation. And remember, we have to have the mergers. And the stock market is paramount. So make sure the stock market is roaring, right? They don't even think that that's an open question. They all assume that that's your main goal is to help the stock market. But that doesn't help the average American much at all. And they're not even having that conversation. Instead, they're having this conversation 3 to 4 times a week.
I want to go to one more clip of the conversation and get a load of the framing from Andrew Ross Sorkin here. Let's watch.
What are the kinds of people you think she's ultimately going to appoint to her cabinet and around her? And I'm thinking of a Treasury Secretary. I'm thinking of,
I have no idea.
Folks who are going to run commerce. But I think it's an important question. I think it's a question about who's going to run the FTC, who's going to run antitrust for the DOJ. I mean, the Biden administration did not surround itself with virtually anybody from the private sector.
Right, I agree with you 100%. So 2 things. One, I told her team, look, put my name in for the SEC. It needs to change. And 2, that I've strongly suggested that she put together a multi-level business advisory group. And they said once we get past the debate, it's something we're going to look very strongly at. And when the details of that I suggested were, 1, you have small entrepreneurs and just a council of those types of business people. 2, medium-sized companies because they have different issues than small or larger. And then, the big companies because they're going to have a completely different perspective.
Yeah, guys, we live under corporate rule. So my bias is that I kind of like Mark Cuban. And there's things that I disagree with him and things I've gotten angry about in regards to him, et cetera. And here, as I watch the whole interview, he's trying to get to the right place. But there's a giant problem here. Here's a Democratic donor saying, why don't you give me the FCC? On the other side, Trump is saying, oh, Elon Musk gave me a lot of money, so I'm gonna have him audit the entire government and restructure the entire federal government because he's my donor. We've turned this into an open auction where the different donors are talking to both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump about how much they can help corporate rule and corporations. And they've totally lost the thread on how to help the actual average American. So this is exactly what's wrong with the system. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.